Imagine a typical classroom in Cubberley High School, Palo Alto, California, in 1967. This wasn't just a date, it was the epicenter of a cultural revolution. The air vibrated with the spirit of freedom, the summer of love, ideals of democracy, and an almost religious belief in personal choice permeated everything. These teenagers, children of the post-war generation, had grown up watching black and white footage of victory over tyranny. They were certain that the horrors of Nazi Germany, seen on grainy film, were distant history, something that could never be repeated in their country. In their world, individuality, championed by hippies and beat poets, was the highest value. Being oneself was law. Conformity was almost a curse word. Synonymous with mental death, they were free, and this knowledge was ingrained in their DNA. Now, imagine these very free, confident teenagers, in just 5 days, a mere 120 hours, voluntarily giving up their individuality, discarding it like old clothes. They would embrace strict, almost military discipline. Their backs would straighten. Their gazes would harden. They'd march through school hallways with precise robotic movements. They'd invent a common symbol, a special greeting resembling a breaking wave, and blindly, without question, obey orders. And here's the scariest part. They would start informing on each other, betraying former friends with fanatical, icy fervor for the slightest doubt. How? How was this possible? Without a single threat, without physical violence, in the heart of free America, in a classroom where just a week before they debated poetry and human rights? This isn't fiction or a movie, script. This is a real socio-psychological experiment called the third wave. It caused a genuine scientific shock. By the end of this account, you'll understand the step-by-step, frighteningly simple mechanism that can turn any community, your office, your sports club, into a totalitarian cult. You'll learn why some students desperately resisted the system, feeling its falsehood deep in their guts like physical pain, while others eagerly became its most zealous enforcers, gaining power they never dreamed of. And the main question, the one that sends shivers down your spine, is, looking in the mirror, whose side would you have been on? Don't rush to answer. It all began with a simple question, one that stumped young history teacher Ron Jones. Imagine the dim classroom, the hum of a projector casting shaky, black and white Holocaust footage onto the wall. When the lights came on, in the lingering silence, a student raised a hand and asked, how could ordinary Germans claim they knew nothing about the concentration camps? How did millions of people allow it to happen? Jones opened his mouth to give a prepared, textbook answer, but the words caught in his throat. They felt false, empty. In that moment, he made a decision that would change them all. He decided not to tell, but to show, to unleash a living virus right there in that room. Day 1. On the blackboard, only 3 words were chalked: strength through discipline. Jones didn't start with ideology. He started with the body. He demanded that everyone sit in a new, utterly unnatural posture. Backs straight as a taut string. Feet flat on the floor. Hands clasped behind their backs. Try sitting like that now. You'll feel the tension. To ask a question, one had to stand, walk decisively to his desk, and begin with a formal, Mr. Jones. From the usual relaxed hum, the whispers and glances, the class transformed in minutes into a silent, perfectly regulated mechanism. Answers became shorter, sharper. And here's the paradox. This harsh drilling didn't bring discomfort, but a strange relief. It removed chaos. It created order. And they liked this order, this predictability. But here's the most interesting part. Who responded with the greatest enthusiasm? Not the straight-A students or the opinion leaders. The most ardent supporters of the new rules were those who always sat in the back, the social invisibles, those considered failures. Why? Because discipline is a great equalizer. It erased all their past failures, their awkwardness, their low social status. In this new system, only one thing mattered: how precisely you followed the rules. And for the first time in their lives, they felt part of something larger, something successful, right, and powerful. It was an intoxicating feeling, and they were willing to do anything to keep it from fading. Discipline created a unified organism. It trained its muscles. But for this organism to become a family, it needed a soul, a common name, and a symbol. And on the second day, they appeared. A new phrase awaited them on the blackboard: strength through community. Jones announced that they were no longer just a class. They were a movement. And this movement had a name: the third wave. He explained a simple, almost mystical idea. Surfers believe the third wave in the ocean is always the strongest, coming after two smaller ones and sweeping everything away. Then he showed them a salute. Try it now. Bend your right arm at the elbow, palm down, at shoulder height. Then snap it forward with a sharp, springy motion, like a breaking wave. They were to use this gesture when meeting each other, always, without exception. And here lies the key to any manipulation: the neurobiological power of symbols. The name and the salute instantly created a clear boundary in their minds. This is the us versus them effect, hardwired into our brains since tribal cave-dwelling days. The gesture ceased to be just a gesture. It became a password, an instant loyalty scanner, a sign of belonging to an elite, special group. Performing it, you affirmed not to the teacher, but to yourself. You are part of the whole, part of that strong, unstoppable third wave. This gave an incredible sense of security and righteousness. Very quickly, this virus spread beyond the classroom. The salute became mandatory in the hallways, the cafeteria, the sports field. Students sought each other out with their eyes to exchange this sharp, confident gesture. They felt their commonality, their growing power. It was like a secret society suddenly brought into the open. And those who refused to salute, or did so carelessly, with an ironic smirk, they instantly became outsiders, outcasts. Their silence sounded like an accusation, their doubt like betrayal. They were no longer viewed as classmates, but as potential enemies. So, look what happened in just 48 hours. They had discipline, which turned them into a single organism. Now, they had community, which gave this organism a soul and a name. The engine was assembled and fueled with the most powerful fuel in the world, a sense of belonging. But for the movement to become a real force, it needed action. It needed a purpose. And on the third day, Jones gave them both. Day 3. A new rule, written with a firm hand, appeared on the blackboard: strength through action. Jones handed out membership cards to everyone, ordinary cards, but they instantly became sacred artifacts. On 3 of them, he had already drawn a bold red cross. He called these 3 students aside, and in a quiet, almost conspiratorial whisper, explained, "You are chosen. You are a special mission. You are my eyes and ears. Your task is to report anyone who breaks the rules, anyone who doubts, anyone who criticizes the third wave." He had created his secret police. And here lies the diabolical psychological mechanism. This isn't just intimidation. It's a hack of our consciousness's operating system. Look, it's one thing to passively agree with rules. It's quite another to actively work for them. When you perform an action, for example, informing on a neighbor, your brain gets trapped. It hates contradictions. If your actions diverge from your beliefs, it hurts. To remove this pain, it either changes the action, which is difficult, or, much simpler, changes the belief. It tells you, since I did it, it must have been right. Therefore, the cause I serve is great. Thus, simple agreement turns into conviction, and conviction, reinforced by action, is burned into neurons and becomes fanaticism. It was at this moment that the game ended and the real horror began. Because denunciations flowed like a river. But what chills the blood is this: it wasn't the 3 students Jones appointed who started informing. They didn't get the chance. Volunteers beat them to it. 20 students voluntarily came to him with reports on their classmates. One of the quietest boys in class, Robert, who had always been bullied, suddenly became Jones's personal bodyguard. He followed him everywhere with a stern, impassive face. Another student, with icy zeal, reported his best friends for daring to question the wave's greatness. Friendship, which seemed eternal just yesterday, crumbled to dust. It simply ceased to matter. Fear paralyzed the school. Doubters fell silent. All dissent vanished, leaving a ringing emptiness. But the loyal followers experienced a new, intoxicating feeling. A feeling that proved stronger than fear, stronger than friendship, stronger than everything. It was pride, and this pride became the fuel for the 4th day. Its motto, strength through pride. On Monday, Ron Jones came to school and realized he had unleashed a genie from a bottle. The experiment no longer belonged to him. The movement was living its own separate life, spreading with viral speed. In the hallways, dozens of students from other classes met him, raising their hands in the wave salute. They begged to be accepted. The school librarian, in a hushed voice, complained that wave members were simply not allowing uninitiated students into the library. The ideology had broken out of the classroom and was infecting the entire school. This is the addictive nature of elitism. Members of the third wave were no longer just students. They were soldiers, an avant-garde. They believed they were part of something great, something important, with a national purpose. This idea gave them a powerful dopamine rush. It was a pure, unadulterated sense of superiority over the gray masses, over those who didn't understand their lofty aspirations. And to preserve this feeling, this high, they were willing to do absolutely anything. In 3 days, a class of 30 had turned into a movement of 200 participants, 200 fanatically devoted teenagers, ready to obey any command. And at this moment, Jones felt a real, icy fear. He had created a monster that could easily consume the entire school. He realized that if he didn't stop it right then, the consequences would be irreversible. He felt this raw, uncontrollable energy as a physical pressure in the air. The monster was loose, and to stop it, Jones resorted to extreme, desperate measures. He gathered all the WAVE members and announced that tomorrow, Friday at noon, a nationwide rally would be held in the auditorium, and there, on a large screen, their true leader would address them. A presidential candidate who, it turned out, had created this youth movement across the country to change America. He promised them a prophet to show them their own reflection. Friday, April 7th. The auditorium, smelling of dust and old varnished wood, was packed. 200 students sat in perfect, precise order, their bodies a single monolith. Backs straight as arrows, chins up, every gaze fixed on the empty stage. An electrifying silence filled the hall, broken only by the collective, nervous breathing. This wasn't just a gathering, it was a rally. They weren't waiting for a teacher. They were waiting for their leader. Their faith, forged in 5 days, was absolute. Today, the creation of a nationwide movement would be announced. Today, their lives would change forever. They were on the threshold of history, and they were ready. Ron Jones walked onto the stage. He said not a word. The film projector started, its mechanical whirring breaking the tense silency. Static flickered across the white screen. A hum. Seconds of waiting stretched into eternity. But the face of a national leader did not appear. Instead, there were grainy, black and white frames from Triumph of the Will, marching soldiers, an ocean of swastika flags, ecstatic faces at the Nuremberg rallies, and then images from concentration camps. The hall froze as if all the air had been sucked out. And then Jones broke the silence. His voice was calm, even, and therefore unbearably terrifying. He said, "There is no leader. This is what it leads to. This is what you have become." And in that moment, something broke. No one screamed. No one protested. Instead of anger, there was deafening shock. And then shame. Imagine that sticky, paralyzing shame, a hot wave washing over your face, making you want to sink into the ground. The students, who just a minute ago were the elite, the powerful, the future of the nation, suddenly saw themselves in the mirror of history. And the reflection was monstrous. They began to cry, softly, silently, holding back their tearing sobs. The illusion collapsed, leaving behind a bitter taste of ash. They silently stood and dispersed, unable to look each other in the eye, as if every glance was a silent accusation. The third wave experiment was over. 5 days, just 120 hours, that had turned the consciousness of an entire school upside down, came to an end. The air in the hall, once thick with anticipation, became rarefied and heavy. But the main, most disturbing lesson of this psychological blitzkrieg was yet to come. How? How exactly did simple rituals, a common salute, and a few slogans manage to so quickly and effectively shut down critical thinking in hundreds of free American teenagers? Let's look into the mind of one of them. Let's call him Mark. On the first day, he thought the new seating arrangement was a silly joke. On the second day, the common salute seemed absurd, but he looked around. All his friends, everyone he respected, were raising their hands with enthusiasm. An inner voice screamed about the ridiculousness of it all, but the fear of being alone, of being an outcast, paralyzed his will, and Mark remained silent. He remained silent, feeling a chill run down his spine when his classmate informed on another for disloyalty. He remained silent because the fear of becoming an outcast was stronger than his doubts. He saw the absurdity, but he chose the warm, safe place within the group. Mark's story is the key. It all starts with discipline. Strict rules erase individuality, turning I into part of an anonymous mass. Then community comes into play, the powerful us versus them trigger. A name, a symbol, a greeting, all instantly create a boundary between we and they. Belonging to we provides a dopamine rush, a sense of power and righteousness. And finally, action. Recruiting new members and informing on the unfaithful solidify belief. This is the classic trap. Once you perform an action in the name of an ideology, your brain, to avoid internal conflict, stops criticizing it. It starts defending it. Critical thinking simply shuts down as unnecessary. And here's the main mistake: to think this is a battle of good versus evil. No. Ron Jones's experiment revealed a much deeper, eternal conflict within each of us. It's the struggle between our desire to be a free, independent individual, going against the cold wind, and our deep, almost animal need to be part of something large, strong, and orderly. This primal call, the need for a pack that provides security and meaning, sometimes proves stronger than any, even the most exalted, ideals of freedom. This mechanism of submission, this psychological reactor that leaked, broke not only the students who blindly followed a leader, it left deep, unhealing scars, emotional burns on its creator, and on everyone who was drawn into this dangerous game that too quickly stopped being a game. When the last student left the auditorium, Ron Jones remained alone in the deafening silence. Amidst scattered posters with the wave symbol, he felt the adrenaline of power, sweet and poisonous, drain from his veins, leaving an icy emptiness. He had achieved his goal. He had visually demonstrated how fascism is born. But the price was too high. He himself had felt that intoxication, that very Lucifer effect, when a good person crosses the line. He saw how the best students turned into informers. He realized he had unleashed a demon that he had barely managed to put back. And this realization was his personal punishment, a sentence he would carry for life. For the students, the consequences were no less severe. For decades, many of them remained silent about what happened in those 5 days. Not because they were forbidden, but because they were unbearably ashamed. Ashamed of their naivete, their cruelty, their willingness to give up freedom for order. The experiment became a collective trauma for them, a splinter in their consciousness. It showed them a dark side of their own nature that they hadn't suspected. And that image was impossible to reconcile with their self. Looking at that side was physically painful. But do you know what's most striking? No one outside the school knew about this experiment that changed dozens of lives. The administration, fearing a scandal, preferred to silence the incident. The walls of Palo Alto High School kept this secret like a crypt. No reports, no investigations. The story of the third wave could have remained a school legend forever. And only in 1976, almost 10 years later, did Ron Jones dare to break the silence. He published an article, The Third Wave, in the Coevolution Quarterly. Only then did the experiment begin its second immortal life. The experiment was attempted to be hidden. Its participants were haunted by shame. But its lessons cannot be undone. Like a virus escaping a lab, the knowledge of the third wave began its own life, serving as a kind of social vaccine. So what does this story, which happened half a century ago in a California school, tell us? Us, living in the 21st century, in an era of information bubbles and social networks, it tells us about a simple, deadly algorithm that works like a computer virus for the human psyche. It always starts with the same thing, a harmless, almost pleasant desire for order, a dream to remove chaos. This order gets a simple, memorable symbol, a logo, a gesture, something that instantly divides the world into us and them. Then the symbol demands action, not simple agreement. No, it demands a public act that proves your loyalty. And this is where the trap snaps shut. Because an action, repeated many times, turns into blind, unreasoning faith. Your brain convinces itself of the correctness of what you are doing. This is not an accident. It is a social engineering protocol, a technology for transforming free people into an obedient mechanism. And it works not only in school classrooms. It works in office cults, in political movements, in online communities, wherever there is uncertainty and a nagging thirst for simple, loud answers. But it's a mistake to think that Ron Jones's students were somehow special, bad. No, among them were future artists, doctors, civil rights activists. They were ordinary teenagers who simply showed how mundane, how banal evil can be when the right conditions are created for it. They fell into a perfectly constructed psychological trap, woven from our most basic, most ancient needs. Some of them became ardent followers because, for the first time in their lives, they felt a warm, intoxicating surge of their own significance, power, respect. And others simply remained silent because they physically felt the side breath of isolation on their necks, the fear of being cast out of the pack. This is an instinct stronger than logic. That's why this story isn't about them. It's about all of us, about the vulnerabilities embedded in our operating system. Therefore, the third wave is not just a history lesson. It is a distorted mirror, like one from a fun house, that shows not a funny, but a terrifying reflection. A mirror that Ron Jones held not only to his students, but to our entire society. And it shows one very unpleasant thing. It shows how easily, through what is called creeping normalcy, our most important values our freedom and individuality can be quietly replaced by a hunger for order, power, and belonging to something great. This doesn't happen suddenly, not with thunder and lightning. It happens step by step. Today, a new dress code. Tomorrow, a mandatory ritual. The day after tomorrow, a list of enemies. And each individual step, taken out of context, seems perfectly logical, even necessary. And you don't notice yourself sinking to the bottom. And now, the most honest question to you, not for an audible answer, only for yourself. Close your eyes and imagine. Feel the stifling, electrified air in that auditorium. Hear the deafening, hypnotic hum of unanimity when everyone around you agrees. Feel on your skin hundreds of gazes waiting for you to become like them, like everyone else. If you were in that atmosphere, under pressure from friends, under the hypnosis of a charismatic leader, would you have raised your hand in the common salute? Would you have remained silent when your friend was being reported? Or would you have been the one person who stood up and said no? Don't rush to answer. Just think about it. Because the very ability to ask yourself this question, that internal chill of doubt about your own righteousness, is the main, perhaps the only, safeguard against any third wave.